Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Backtracking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Caliban, and I always earn more sessions by sleeving, and I'm joined on this episode by my co-host.
I'm Gooey Fame, and I'm the master of the tennis racket.
And we have returned to explore the stories behind your favorite Trek shows, and today we're talking about two works of fiction that explore love, pride, and lying your ass off. It's the 1987 film Roxanne and the 5th season DS9 episode Looking for Parmach in All the Wrong Places.
This is nice, because it's kind of a romantic season here. Did we plan this? I don't think we planned this.
Well, you know, it's around that time of the year when lovers' hearts are forced to buy chocolate for each other and cards. And I thought it was, it's a good way to start the season. Start it with a bang, with a classic film and I think maybe it's hard to judge. I feel like this episode is kind of overlooked, but I think it's fun. It's a solid mid DS9 episode.
Yeah. Mid in a good way. Not the new bad mid.
Yeah, past the bad mid, past the early shaky DS9, not quite to the epic, 10-episode arc DS9. This is right in the middle. Those little slice of life episodes that DS9 does really well. Cozy, that's a good adjective. Yeah, for sure. So welcome back to anybody who isn't familiar with the show. Of course, as I said before, we examine the real-life inspirations behind episodes of Star Trek, and we'll talk a little more about the connection between the both real-life person, the play based on his life, and the DS9 episode that draws heavily from the inspiration of that person and that play later in the show.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the real-life lore, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, we can get into that a little bit. And also maybe because we both watched it, even though we're not directly going to reference it or focus on it, there is a very recent film called Cyrano, which is starring Peter Dinklage and is not out widely yet, but we've both watched that.
Yeah, so we're pretty prepared here. We've absorbed all the media.
I think we are.
There's like
I don't know,
a lot of... No, yeah, I don't know. I was like, because I wanted to also know more about the play, because we kind of watched different interpretations. So I looked into it, and then I saw there were other movies that
there are
people like, and I was like, maybe I should watch one. And I just couldn't do it, but I almost did consider, because I feel like those would be even more faithful, interpretations, it seemed, but just don't have the time.
Yeah, there are some very explicit adaptations of the play Cyrano de Bergerac. It's also, as we'll talk about with the DS9 episode, but also in popular culture, it's, popular to have a Lori Loughlin movie where she's going to help C. Thomas Howell get Kelly Preston, by writing letters and love poems to somebody. So there's a lot of interpretations of that, both in Hollywood and America and across the world. So we'll definitely dig into that as we go. But first, let's talk about the news of the world of Star Trek. And there's not too much to say other than we're always promised by the people in charge of Paramount Star Trek that there's more Star Trek coming.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be... We've talked about this on the show in the past, how it just seems like there's this wave or wall of new content that's constantly coming. And maybe that's the way that you do it in the digital age. I know that there are always new things on Paramount Plus. Something that they're gearing up for currently is the new Halo show that'll be coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think people are very excited but wary of the quality of that, if it's going to be any good. But despite all that, Star Trek continues with 5 series and with 2 series that we know of in the pipe, the Section 31 series and the Starfleet Academy series, which is in development. And supposedly they had one of these critic events, where they do like pressers for the network and for the franchise. Alex Kurtzman, the head of Star Trek at CBS, may have mentioned another show that's in development. My God. But he did that like, I can't say anything right now. So it's like, all right, well, is it a real thing? We don't know.
Yeah.
But his boss, who is the head of programming or the VP of programming, said that they are looking at curated Star Trek experiences for the future.
Interesting.
A Star Trek flight. A flight of some Star Treks.
Maybe some, what do you call it? Maybe like a Universal Studios ride or something. Like something. What would Paramount?
Star Tours for Star Trek.
Yeah, you get on a little shaky, boat, and they're like, "Oh, we're going through a nebula," and they shake you.
Universal Studios I think it was Universal. They used to have a Star Trek attraction like that where you go in and it was one of those you could be in a movie things. And so a friend of mine did this. And they pick like 5 or 6, park attendees, and then they have them put on costumes. I think they were wearing the Monster Maroon costumes from the movies, and do like a little script, and then they cut everything together, and then you get to see it. And he showed me like this tape that he had of him being in a Star Trek thing, and I was like, oh, I want to do that so bad.
That is awesome, yeah.
But I don't think that exists anymore.
To like make like a bad fan acting thing. Like I would love to be in that.
Yeah. And it's a funny script. It's not supposed to be serious. And he's had acting experience. So his one big moment as one of the crew members was like, he was like talking, into his communicator. "We don't see anything on the surface, sir." And as he's saying that, like a monster's like coming up behind him to kill him. And so like he really played that up.
Aww.
And then I think at the Star Trek Experience, they had certain things that you could do, get your picture taken like inside of, the bridge or at Quarks or something like that.
Right.
All I'm saying is like Paramount, make some kind of deal or open a park of your own. Let's get some Star Trek content like in a park.
Right. I feel like I've become very like cynical about it. Like they just always have to be like announcing new stuff, whether it's wanted or warranted. It's just like they've got to keep like pleasing people, or like almost like if you're an investor or something like that, like, hey, this streaming service, we're gonna have 1 million Star Trek things on it. Like we just got to keep pumping the Star Trek, or turning the Star Trek crank, I guess, and we can't ever let go.
Yeah, I'm sure it's for what you said, for investors and for stockholders, but the way that if I was a stockholder, I would probably look at it like I do as a fan and think, well, it seems like it's kind of coming out willy-nilly, It's just, it doesn't, I mean, there's a lot of it and it's pretty good, but it seems like it's just coming out without any regard for the other content you've got or with any certain time period. And of course, COVID throws a monkey wrench into the works. But, when I think back to the 2 seasons of short treks that we had, which varied in quality, but I always thought was a pretty good idea. I also kind of had a suspicion at the back of my mind that they were just doing this to sort of keep the torch burning, while they were making more discovery. And they weren't really trying to examine Trek, in the short film space. And now that it's been a couple years since we've had any, it kind of seems like that's what it was. Like these aren't like little deleted scenes, for subscribers. They were just sort of trying to keep Trek in the conversation. And now they can just do that because there's literally new Trek on every Thursday, which was their goal from the beginning.
Yeah, you're totally right. That's how I feel about a lot of stuff, even outside of Star Trek, when there's a lot of stuff that gets announced and I'm like, that could be cool. Like you could do something cool with that. But now, maybe this is bad, but I just assume like, yeah, that could be cool, but I doubt it will be. And that's kind of like, I'm not even saying that just about Star Trek. I think I just kind of temper my expectations for anything that's announced, at Disney Investor Day or anything like that. It feels like, all these things could be cool, but they're really just announced to, for investors and stuff like that, to keep the brand alive.
Well, hope springs eternal, it would seem.
Yeah.
And we will continue to talk about new Trek shows as they appear. Before we move on, any opinion on the Halo show?
I mean, the trailer, it didn't look great. It looked kind of cheap, I guess. I don't know. I didn't think it looked very good. And it had, and then a lot of it that's not good, I feel like it's just like not good in a lot of ways. A lot of trailers are. It had like the slowed down whatever song it was. I don't even remember.
I don't remember either.
That used to be like memorable, even though it was always kind of silly. But you would remember like, oh, it had this song because it, referenced something. But now anymore, it's just like, I don't know. It's Nirvana. Take your pick.
Yeah. At least whoever's in charge of the show didn't come out and say, like, the Master Chief really does trade his tears for fears or whatever it is.
Right.
Like the Batman directors, like, this is a Kurt Cobain Batman. It's like, what does that mean? I hope he's got a rule against guns, but yeah.
Yeah, that one I kind of like because it is, I don't know, it's so silly that it works.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess
Where did you sleep last night? Yeah.
Wow. I'm not like a big Halo fan, though. I think Halo is cool.
I'm not either.
But this show doesn't. What I do know about Halo and like the lore, like this show doesn't seem to have any of that. So I don't know.
Yeah. And there's like 50 like novels and comics and stuff, so there is a lot of lore, and I think that they have done, what you can expect a mid-sized TV network to do, which is throw all that away. And so I think they're kind of set in their own timeline. They're going to do their own thing. As somebody who has played Halo but is not like a diehard fan, I do feel like I can say objectively that, yeah, I mean, it looks like a TV show, and there's something about the aesthetic of Trek, and they've pushed this boundary, I think, with the new shows, but it always kind of looks, we accept that it looks not like a movie. Like we accept that, a movie about people in space or spaceships is probably going to look really detailed and really expensive in a film. And even a Star Trek film still has the aesthetic of a TV show, which is to say a little more basic in terms of its art design and presentation. And yeah, going from like the Xbox games where you can kind of do whatever you want on a computer to, well, we have to have like practical, for the most part, physical things. It's going to be a jump for some people. But overall, I think it doesn't look terrible. Although I will say, I don't know what they're doing with Cortana. She looks really weird.
That was, I think, the kind of, for me, I was kind of like, everything about it looked like, this is kind of par for the course for a lot of these types of shows. But then she shows up, she looks weird, and she goes, "Hi, I'm Cortana," and it's like,
"Hi."
It really felt like, recognize me.
Yeah, right.
Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Remember me?
That pushed me over, like, where I was like, not even like this is the most egregious thing, but I was kind of just like indifferent on it, and I'm like, I saw that, and I was like, I think this looks bad, but
people have theorized that they're going to pull like a Sonic and maybe try to change that, like, because all these things, if you've got time to change things still, then every trailer is just is a focus group, right? Is like, what do you guys think of this? Yeah. So maybe they'll blue her up a little bit or do something else.
I love how movies and TV shows are made now.
Yeah, it's all in beta. It's never goes gold.
Like, oh, do you little piggies like this? They just change
what do you little hogs think about this? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you heard recently, but the New York Times crossword did a shout out to both Star Wars and Star Trek.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah. In their, it was a couple days ago, so I guess maybe Sunday, in their crossword, they had a clue that said, the better of two sci-fi franchises. And it was an 8-word clue, and if you've been doing the clues up to this point, you would see that the first 4 letters are definitely STAR, and then the last 4 are kind of up to you. And I guess this is kind of clever, although it's not what I'm looking for necessarily in a crossword. But you could put either Wars or Trek in there, and then that's a crossed, and then the downward clues would also fit. Would be 2 different words that would both fit the clues for those downward ones as well.
Yeah, I sort of wondered, though, what if you did the other clues first?
Gate. Would gate work? I don't think gate. Let's see. GRAP. Grap. That's not a word.
You're like, Battlestar Galactica doesn't fit in here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, Star...
Farscape.
Starscape. Yeah, Farscape. That had people talking. I guess I never want to look too deep into the discourse, but I kind of wonder if people responded more on the Trek side or more on the Star Wars side.
I didn't see anything about it other than this happened and people just being like, oh, that's neat. So didn't ruffle any feathers. That just means they got to do a Star Trek Wordle now that they got that.
Oh my God. Well, they definitely, they'll have to be now that the New York Times says bought Wordle.
Yeah, what's a 5-letter Trek word?
Uh,
Wow, I feel stupid now.
Earth.
Even. Earth. Home
Jeremy's
of Captain
Iron?
James T. Kirk.
Yeah. Cisco. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Cisco and his crewmates in the place where he lives, or something connected to that, ostensibly. Our feature subject for this week's episode, the archetypal romantic hero, is a rakish figure, as quick with his wit as he is with his sword, a man of many talents who rejects the precepts of polite society and seeks to cut his own path, even as he is often hindered by alienation or brooding tragedy. All these qualities were possessed both by the literary and historical Cyrano de Bergerac, though the historical Cyrano was probably not so nasally endowed as his literary counterpart. The popular image of Cyrano was established by Edmond Rostand's 1897 play that bears his name, and it's a tragedy of unrequited love, self-destructive shame, and frustrated destinies. So why not turn it into a romantic comedy where Steve Martin whips the shit out of Kevin Nealon with a tennis racket? That was done for the 1987 hit comedy Roxanne.
Can I look at those nose cards one more time? Oh, yeah.
C.D. Bales had a small problem.
They said it was big, but I didn't expect it to be big.
He could handle every situation, except the one that mattered most.
I'm locked out of my house.
Come on inside, I'll get some tools.
I don't have any clothes on. Maybe you'd like some wine with your nose. Cheese.
I want to look like Diana Ross.
I think she's fallen in love, but she doesn't know it yet.
There's someone I think I should get to know better. His name's Chris McConnell.
This time I want you to do it, Dave. I want you to cut the thing off.
Maybe you could encourage him a little.
Look, she wants somebody who looks like me and talks like you.
Don't panic. Stay calm. Stay calm.
Because there is a heart here
That's good. That's okay.
that wants you worse to know that there's a possible 502 on Main.
So why'd you say those things?
Tell her you were afraid of words.
Because I was afraid of worms, Roxanne. Worms!
Worm.
Love may be blind,
Get out.
Get in!
No, get out.
Get in!
but hopefully Roxanne isn't. Steve Martin,
Hey!
Daryl Hannah,
Why don't you just get that nose job?
I did.
Roxanne.
Hello. 15 love.
Yes, it's one of those, we hit upon these stories a couple of times where I feel like it is kind of a classic tale, and you mentioned, like, it could be adapted into a lot of things. Like, I was talking to a friend who, she's also been watching Deep Space Nine through, and she just watched this episode, coincidentally, and she mentioned, like, she didn't really like it, and her kind of reference point was, she was like, oh, I feel like this is the plot of a lot of, like, tween movies I've watched. And I'm like, well, those type of movies do love to just kind of take some of these classic, you know, stories and refit them to, you know, fit a modern age. But yeah, I feel like we've hit upon one of those that it also works for Star Trek.
It's a timeless story. Yeah, there was one recently. It was like The Kissing Booth, or maybe not that, but I think there was like a Netflix one recently that was that same thing. You know, where I like so-and-so, but they like somebody else. And so, or like, is Some Kind of Wonderful like that? Or is that something else?
I don't think I've seen that, actually.
That's a John Hughes movie from way back. But yeah, this kind of thing gets done a lot. And when Steve Martin decided to adapt this, he wrote the script himself. He specifically was thinking about the Jose Ferrer version of the film, the 1950 film.
Yeah, that's I saw that and I thought about trying to watch it, but
based on the play. And what he liked about it was the idea that this guy, despite how he looked, you know, was a man of letters. He was, you know, good at everything. He was noble in his own way. He was, you know, the smartest guy in the room. You know, he was good with a sword. And yet he was, for some reason, for a physical reason, sort of like apart. And I can see Steve Martin and what he said about, like, his childhood and coming up in comedy, him feeling a kinship to this character, being somebody who is very intelligent, but as soon as he hits the comedy scene, he's already like subverting comedy and doing comedy that kind of makes fun of comedy and public performance.
Yeah.
And thinking of Cyrano as kind of a kindred spirit in that way.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I felt like in this and that movie we watched with Peter Dinklage, like it seemed to be, they kind of had that element of the character in both. And it's like, I would describe him as like, Cyrano is like, he's like so epic that it's almost obnoxious, like, but I think, depending on who you have play him, like they can really make that work. Cause I feel like if I saw or knew someone like that in real life, I'd be like, this person is like kind of annoying.
A little extra.
But like, Steve Martin, I think has what it takes, I think, to kind of sell him as like very endearing, despite, he almost comes off like a know-it-all or something,
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
But he's very likable.
He is. And he's very, there's a thing about like, I think this is a great movie, but it's definitely a movie that has not been talked about in a while, I don't think. And I think it's partially because what people kind of laugh at and what people think of as funny has changed a lot since then. I think I wrote in my notes as I was watching it, like, silly could be sexy in the 80s, and like maybe the better films of Mike Myers was kind of the sundown of a character being plausibly attractive to women, but yet like doing goofy pizza chef, or weird accents, impressions and things like that. You can't really get away with that now.
It's the classical form of "she let me hit it because I'm goofy."
Yeah, right. Yeah, and both Steve Martin in real life and also the character of C.D. Bales in the film is like this motor mouth who's always doing stuff, and the bits aren't all great, but if you don't like them, there's going to be another one coming up pretty soon, and just that kind of funny. Robin Williams kind of rapid fire sort of delivery.
I think they were funny, like the scene I was watching with my girlfriend, like that scene where he's like roasting himself. They totally they did that same thing in 8 Mile. when he rap battled himself at the end. He's like, I'm gonna say all the bad things about me.
Right.
That's all I could think about.
I'll use everything up, and then
But we were watching that scene, and we were like, I mean, not all of them were funny, and it's a little, I guess to what you were saying, like where it's like that would play different now. It is like a little corny, but it's funny and it's endearing. I loved it. I thought this was a very funny movie.
Yeah, and that scene and many of the things that we see in this film come directly from the original 1897 play. There's a scene near the beginning where a guy is like, "Hey, you've got a big nose and you're an ass," and he's like, "That's all you got. That's it." And then he goes through, and through a couple pages, he goes through like, accusative, he calls out all of his shots and does, I don't know if it's 20, but does like a series of these hits on him. And then at the end is like, and all you said was ass. Well, what a waste.
It also does make me think too, that like kind of back, like with what I was saying about how he's a little obnoxious, like it makes me think of like how a lot of like artists I really admire and respect are like kind of like silly or insane or maybe even stupid. He's not stupid, but you know what I mean? Like they're just like, it feels like they're strange basically. And I'm like, yeah, this guy is really clever and funny. And I think because of that, he would, I don't know, he almost has to have that kind of mind where he's like, he's always got these zingers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like such a cool character, I think, actually.
And the thing about that character often, and you see this a lot in other 80s films, especially like high school films, is that character is like smart and cool, but like, it's kind of a loner. And like the girls are like, what's his deal? And, like he's a John Cusack character. He's a Christian Slater character. And I like the fact that Steve Martin, probably he could have done that, but he doesn't. Like he's, he's an open guy. He has a lot of friends in town. He feels, he's lonely because he feels like he can't have a relationship, but he's nice to his coworkers, unless they mention his nose. And and he's positive, and he wants him to be a good fire department, and he's sort of like a booster. He's like working like in the town, and he's not just like up on a mountain, just looking at the horizon or something like that. Like your typical sort of Byronic hero.
Totally, yeah. And you mentioned like with his note, it has a really good like tone with how they handle the reality of the world, because it's like very realistic, but the nose is obviously like a little bigger than I feel like anyone you would ever see, but like at the same time, like no one really mentions it, but it is a part of his character, but then you find out why no one mentions it.
Yeah.
And then like the first person who doesn't know him sees it, and they actually react like in a way that it feels kind of realistic. Like if you saw it, because that nose is not, it's very unusual, like from real life, it's like a literal prosthetic or whatever.
Both in the, and the character of Christian or Christian, in the play is a character who kind of gets along with him, but it's part of him not being very eloquent. He's also really guileless, and I think Rick Rossovich does a good job in Roxanne of just being like, yeah, he's got a big nose. Yeah, I know. And then he finally sees it and he's like, oh my God, this is huge.
Yeah.
And Steve Martin's like, you know what? I'm not going to kill you. I just don't feel like killing you.
Yeah. I just feel like with all of that, how it handles all of that, and really just in general of how the people act in this movie, it has a good job of like feeling very real, but also like a heightened kind of ridiculous at the same time. I feel like it walks that line really well. Yeah,
and it makes sense that it's Steve Martin, and he likes sort of up positive kind of comedy. It makes sense that the entire, because the story of Cyrano is a tragedy, and that is totally reversed and lightened in this. That he isn't an outcast. He doesn't. He makes jokes about like, oh no, we don't do irony here. I did that, and I was the only person doing it, and I stopped. But the town still likes him, and he ostensibly likes everybody in the town, even though he does feel a little superior to them. Whereas the real Cyrano is like 100 guys are coming to kill him because he pissed like everybody off, because he can't keep his mouth shut about stuff.
Right, because I came into this after watching Cyrano and being kind of more familiar with the source material as well, after looking into it a little bit. And I was like, when they introduced like Fred Willard and he's the mayor, and they introduced this guy, I'm like, and I'm thinking about how instead of soldiers, they're firemen. I was thinking like, oh, is that one guy going to like die in a fire or something?
Yeah.
Because of the mayor? Yeah. And I was like, oh no. Then I read like Steve Martin was like, I wanted to do it if Cyrano got the girl in the end.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
So it's funny. It does feel a little bit like he like connected with that story, but he was like, I want to make it where I've got the good outcome.
Yeah, why does it have to be sad and a tragedy? Why couldn't that guy get the girl? And that's, we don't do it too much, but he is surrounded by kind of a cast of misfits as well. And that scene where he goes on the roof and he talks to the chubby kid and kind of like identifies with him.
That was nice, yeah.
You can see that, that there's this theme of like, I mean, the tragedy is that I personally feel like my problems are too big to overcome, but I'm going to encourage other people to sort of, to deal with, whatever hand life has dealt them.
Yeah, he really didn't seem like that. I guess I expected him to be more of a tragic figure in this, even if it didn't have the bad ending. But yeah, I don't know. He seems like he's got it all together.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that they. Let's talk about all the characters. We talked about Steve Martin's character a little bit. Then there's Rick Rossovich, who plays what was his character's name?
I don't know. What
Chris.
Chris. Oh, that makes sense.
Short for Christian. Yeah. And of course Daryl Hannah is Roxanne, and I liked giving Roxanne a little more agency, in this story, because in the original story she's this beautiful woman that Cyrano is in love with, and she's kind of important for that reason, and not really any other reason. And she gets mad at Costian when he can't poetry as well as he was before. But in this, like, she's an astronomer, which I thought was really interesting. Of course, she's looking for a comet. The year before, 1986, was the return of Halley's Comet, which was kind of a big deal in popular culture at that time. Mm-hmm. And it also kind of fits the historical Cyrano's writings and work. You know, he wrote a couple books about that were basically like early science fiction about a trip to the moon and a trip to the sun. And that's kind of reflected in what Roxanne's character is up to.
That's cool.
Yeah. It also explains why they have that scene where he falls he falls out of a tree, and then
that was so funny.
He convinces the old ladies, you know, that there's aliens and they want to have sex with older women, and they're all at Roxanne's house. Yeah, because he does something similar in the play where he falls out of a tree and like. He's doing the same thing. He's trying to get some guys to go to Roxanne's house to break up, you know, her and and Christian.
That was a good bit. And yeah, I feel like Roxanne, they just made her like really cool in this, I guess. Like she just seemed like there's a lot of like I liked when the one guy was like coming on to her at the bar or whatever when she's hanging out, and she kind of rejects him or whatever. It was like a fun scene. Yeah, she just kind of had her own like life. Like as you said, she wasn't just like just the love interest, you know. She had her own thing kind of going on.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Cyrano is in love with, I think she's his cousin actually in the play, but that's okay in those days. And I don't know if she is as witty and as intelligent as he is. Like, would they even be a good match? I don't really know, but. In this positive comedy, she is. You know, she's smart too. She knows things that he doesn't. She's talking about quarks, which is the first of a couple Star Trek connections that you can find in this movie.
Yeah, not all of them. Yeah, yeah. It because what I kind of liked about the ending too, it had like a good part where like because Chris is a little bit of a he's sort of a dummy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe like he's kind of a dick in the end, but I think I like that it wasn't just like you weren't good enough for her because you're too stupid. It was just like clearly he got with like the person who he actually had like chemistry with in the end, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. It was like, oh, they got together. Like it was a happy ending for everyone almost. And
nobody has to die. Yeah.
And I just kind of like that it was like, yeah, Roxanne actually, it made sense like that she was with C.D. Bales in the end because like they had the connection, they had the real chemistry.
Yeah, and she only had to run around naked for the first part of the film, but it was Daryl Hannah in the 1980s. She had to be naked.
They handled that pretty well. It was
that's true.
It was more about seeing Steve Martin do flips or someone doing flips, which is awesome.
I did. It's that sort of like heightened reality where it's a slightly cartoonish, but you kind
they
of
nailed that.
Accept it. Yeah,
and
the guy getting blown up by the water spout. He keeps showing up like in the window.
Yeah. That was so funny. Yeah. So it is a little bit of like, like we got to get her clothes off in the beginning, but it also is like that's like a funny way to like.
That's their meet cute.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's something I liked about this. I don't know how the like whole play is, but I did watch that movie, and they kind of. I think it works fine, but they kind of like insert you into like they've been friends for the longest time. They know each other. Whereas I kind of liked in this, you kind of got to see like them like hanging out for a while, and you saw like they already make like a pretty good match, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I guess it works better for the, you know, the more feel good ending is that we get some, you know, quality time, I guess.
I'm trying to think of what Rick Rossovich has a face and a body that I feel like I've seen before. I know he plays one of Sarah's roommate's boyfriend in Terminator. He's a guy that gets killed by the Terminator early on. And he's probably, I think he was one of the volleyball guys, one of the pilots in Top Gun. He's been in stuff, but he's definitely that guy who, I'm sure he works now on like cop shows or something like that. But in the 80s, if you needed a guy with muscles and a flat top who's going to be dumb but pleasant, like that's the guy that you go to. And I think that he's good casting for this. And
I always wonder
like in films like this, how much of it is scripted on the page and how much is just kind of made up. But I thought a lot of his kind of sidelines or ad libs were really funny. Like when he's talking to Sandy and they're talking about how he's like, oh yeah, I used to, go up in the mountains and it's so peaceful. I bring a meat sandwich with me sometimes. And it's just like the weird non sequiturs. Later Roxanne is trying to get him to say more poetry and she's like, teach me what you know. He's like, I know a little guitar. I thought that was just little bits like that.
That's what I mean. Like, I think with everything, including him, they did nail a tone of like, he's goofy, he's funny, he's like kind of a meathead, but he's not like, it's not like they don't run it into the ground. Like he's not like a total idiot. You know what I mean? He's
right.
He is like likable. You know what I mean? Like, I liked his character. I really liked this actor too. And I did while watching, I'm like, what else has he been in? Cause like, I was kind of hoping to see that he was in something else that I would really want to watch, but it was just stuff like, oh, he was in Terminator and stuff like that. So that's too bad.
I was watching this with my girlfriend as well, and she pointed out that obviously Roxanne has a cat named Grover, but I think I think CD has a cat as well, but you only see it in one or two scenes when he is helping Chris write the letter for the first time, and the cat is like laying down on a table or something behind the couch, and it is completely still for this very long scene where they're sort of talking about like what they're going to put in the letter, and he's like, I was going to throw up, oh, you're my only nourishment, that sort of thing. And the cat doesn't move at all. It's just like you think about like a movie set with like 40 people on it and like two actors running around and jumping up and down, and she was like, is that cat stuffed? Is that cat alive?
I didn't
but
even
later
notice.
In a later scene, we see through Chris's window him, I think it's when he's like playing with the birds or maybe reading a letter. You see again the cat in the same position, and I'm like, oh my God, that cat's stuffed. That's not a real cat. But then you can see its ears slightly twitch, like as it's laying down. I'm like, oh, thank God. Thank God that cat's real. I mean, it's dead now relieved. For sure. But yeah, well, that's why you don't work with animals and cats. Or, well, animals and kids, but cats as well. There's a lot of like strange kind of cartoony bits that make this, a sort of elevated reality. There's Fred Willard trying to get Oktoberfest to work in the middle of July in this Colorado or Wyoming town. Steve Martin is having breakfast with Shelley Duvall in her cafe, and I think he's eating a cupcake with a knife and a fork, and I don't know if that is like a nose thing or if it's just like a weird thing, like a quirky thing, or if he really does that in real life.
That could be a little bit of both, like, because like I was saying, like he does, like someone like that has to be a little bit of a weirdo,
eccentric.
Yeah, right. But also, the nose thing works. It was funny, like he did the nose bit in the beginning, but then like later he was having a drink and it was just fine,
Yeah. Well, that's also from the original play. Cyrano talks about like the party trick that he can do by sucking wine through his nose.
Oh yeah.
To enjoy the bouquet of the wine,
right?
Yeah.
I thought the Fred Willard subplot would like do more, but it was just kind of like funny dressing.
It gave us Bossy the cow though. Yeah,
Bossy. Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess they had the fire they had to put out. I really liked like just that character because it seemed like he was desperate to like. At the drop of the hat, he will sell this town out, basically.
Yeah, right.
Just really good.
But also super affable. And then everything works out.
He was
and it's
likable.
like, oh, great, I don't have to sell the town. Yeah, it's great.
He was on the fire department, too?
I think as the mayor, he was just, a member of the volunteer fire department. Because there's one point where CD's talking to him and he's like, yeah, I know, but they're a great bunch of guys. Look, we'll try to get some of the funds back to you after Oktoberfest is over, and then you can get the training going.
Oh, so he's just like, he's got to be there type thing.
He's got these schemes and plans.
Well,
he's trying to make this into a resort town.
I sort of related because my dad was actually the mayor of the small town I lived in, but he was also
really?
He still is on the volunteer fire department. It was the other way around where he was a fireman and then like it's like there's 400 people in the town, so if enough people think you're a cool dude, they'll just make you mayor. And
I didn't know you came from a political family.
Yeah, it's a big dynasty. I think he was like technically the village head of the village council is the title.
Sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, that's sort of what I imagined. Like, it gave me this headcanon for like Fred Willard of like he's just like a cool dude, so like enough people were like, yeah, you're mayor.
Yeah. And he's the only person that Steve Martin goes really hard on, but he doesn't even do it to his face. Like after he learns about the cow, and Fred Willard's like, this is great, and he walks off. Then Steve Martin's like, what? It could be genius. Was I there? Was I present when the genius came? Yeah, I think so. I think this is going to work. For like nobody at all. He's just doing this. Yeah. One of the other crazy characters in this film, full of crazy characters, is a character played by Michael J. Pollard, who has appeared on this show previously as Cousin Virgil when we talked about Miri and the Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, are you okay?
He played one of the kids in Miri.
Oh, okay. Wow. I did
Remember
not.
that bonk, bonk, bonk on the head?
Yeah, he was one of the bonk on the head kids.
He was like one of the main ones.
He was the main
oldest one John, the oldest one other than Miri.
Oh my God. I barely remember. I mean, I remember the kids, but I barely remember him. Okay, cool. I like when we have the crossovers.
Yeah. And he's an interesting guy, character actor, obviously, usually called on to do exactly what he's doing in this film, just sort of act weird and spacey. But
right.
I'm
totally remembering because his face is so actually memorable.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah.
I remember watching it.
Yeah, why isn't he Cyrano? Make him Cyrano.
He would be great. I remember watching this actually and being like, I have seen this guy probably in a bunch of stuff, but I could not place it. And I think that might be it. I don't know. But yeah, he's awesome. I really liked they had like with all the firemen and some of the other like side characters, just like characters that you don't really give much to, but they're just immediately so memorable and like you feel like you kind of get them right away.
Yeah. A young Damon Wayans is in this too. He's got like one line.
He was good too. I liked him. Yeah.
I love that. It's just like the wacky things that happen in this movie, but I love that like while they're talking with Chris, who hasn't met CD yet, about how he's different, he and another actor whose name I don't know, they're both like covered in like fire extinguisher residue. Like they've been either testing them or you get the idea that maybe one blew up off camera, and like these guys are just like, completely helpless as firemen.
Yeah, like I love it when he shows up and like the trash is on fire and no one's down there.
Yeah.
So good.
Although you remember from the Peter Dinklage movie, there's a scene in a bakery. Maybe it's supposed to evoke that, because I'm sure there would be people, covered in flour, like talking about what's going on in a bakery scene. So maybe it's supposed to be that. Yeah, the more that I started reading about the play, the more I saw like, oh, I bet that was like a reference that Steve Martin was trying to put in.
So he probably put in a lot of details that you wouldn't even realize.
I don't want to move away from this if we're not done, but do you want to talk about the 2022 movie Cyrano at all?
We could do that, I guess.
I'd hate to waste the investment that we put into it by watching it.
Well, cause I think because we were talking about doing that first, and we both kind of watched it, and I didn't hate a lot of the movie. Basically, what I would say is that I think it was like a well-acted, well-done movie and everything. I just think the part where I'm not opposed to like musicals, but I don't think they did a good job making it one. And that's like really, if it didn't have that, which is kind of the whole hook of it, I feel like, then I think it would be a better movie, like by far. I think I would have really liked it.
When I sat down to watch it, I guess I didn't process that it was a musical, and so when Roxanne, played by Haley Bennett, begins singing, I was like, oh no, okay, all right, that's what it is.
I feel like they didn't. I tried looking up who did the music, because
I can tell you who did it. Yeah,
who was it?
The guys from the National, the band The National.
Okay, that makes sense because there was like one of the later scenes they had the guy from the Swell season.
Yes.
And that
There's
was
a scene
close to the best song because it had like a better melody. But I feel like what I got from it was that like a lot of the songs, like they were just very kind of monotonous and like it felt like
I'm not familiar with the National at all, but my girlfriend knows them, and she's like, oh, this is just like the National. It's like da 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 da, like that's like they're just kind of monotonous songs.
So did they like also write the lyrics, or were those like adapted from the writing?
I don't think so. I think it's all I mean, I'm sure they probably had somebody help them like with the book, but because as far as I know, it's just them.
I actually I listen to a lot of music that sounds like that, and I do listen to a lot of music that the vocals are sort of in that sort of melodic range, and like it does sometimes sound like it's like not it's very like literal, lyrics, and it feels sort of like stream of conscious a little bit, but I don't think that works for this musical they're trying to do. I don't know. It felt like that maybe would have made it better, like if you did like an album inspired by the play or something, but it really felt like it felt like I handed you words from the play, and I guess that might not be what they did.
And I'm just kind of like freestyling within a certain range.
Yeah, like, it's poetic words, so you could just kind of like sing it. It just didn't work. Yeah, it was not. That killed me.
Yeah. And Dinklage is, I think, Dinklage is good, but like, the kind of character that he plays is too much. When you think about the character of Cyrano as originally presented, also, the real life poet and musician and man of letters, you think about him as being somebody who's very clever, but has kind of, a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And I think that that's kind of what Dinklage was going for, and he gets. But if you look at how successful Steve Martin is by playing up the ridiculousness of that character and adding some of the warmth, it's just so much more successful than Peter Dinklage coming in with his American accent when everybody else is speaking in a British accent, even though they're in France, and just kind of doing. Right. I compared it to like. Remember that Doritos commercial he was in for the Super Bowl?
I have not seen it, no.
He's just kind of like doing this rap, and he's just like talking really fast. The staging just didn't make any sense to me, because I know they want to do like they're sparring with swords and they're sparring with words. But that means that you've got this guy who's like huffing and puffing and doing all the things, and you don't really hear any of the words, and he's supposedly saying clever things and getting it in, but you just kind of miss it all. And that's the only scene where his quote-unquote wit is really showcased. Like after that, it becomes a pretty kind of stereotypical musical. So I don't know what they really wanted to accomplish with it. When it first, like the first 10 minutes, I was like, this is the new Cats. Like this is going to be, horrendous, but like amazingly horrendous. And the movie just kind of settles in to be just kind of like a typical romantic movie where they stop to sort of sing in a monotone fashion every once in a while. I was kind of disappointed.
Yeah, that kept bringing me down, because like I said, all the other parts of the movie I really liked, and I was like, oh, I really kind of want this to be like I wanted to like it almost, but I just really couldn't. Like every time someone started, have you ever wanted? I'm like, oh no, not again.
Yeah. And also Dinklage, nobody in this movie except maybe Haley Bennett is like a particularly gifted vocalist.
Right.
So,
and that can be fine, I think, in a song. That can be fine too, because he does have like he goes for it, is what I'll say. He's trying. And I think
this isn't a that wizard is from the moon situation. Like he is trying.
Right.
This
yeah. And I like I said, I think there's a lot of songs. I don't really listen to the National, but like songs of that ilk that I like, where even the singer isn't like the best singer, but they have an interesting voice and they have passion. And I just think, I don't know, it just didn't translate. Like that just doesn't make a musical. I think. But I don't know. I don't know anything about musicals, so.
Well, would it interest you to know that the script and ostensibly the words to the songs were written by Erica Schmidt, his wife, and it's all an adaptation of I believe 2019 stage musical that they did off Broadway.
Okay, yeah, that sounds
with those
cool.
members of the National.
Interesting. I still don't think that would be good to watch, but I don't know. I'd almost rather just hear some show tunes. Like, let's. You know.
If you think, so Joe Wright directed this, and I'll lay a lot of it at the feet of Erica Schmidt and Peter Dinklage in terms of it, like, not exactly sparking joy. But Joe Wright, I don't know what he's doing these days. He directed that Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice a while ago that I think is a pretty good film version of Pride and Prejudice. And then immediately went from that into Anna Karenina, which is not good. And I do think that, Anna Karenina having the subject that it does and also being Russian literature is a little dour and a little dry, but he tried to turn it on its ear and really play up the comic elements, making it almost like a Moulin Rouge-esque kind of thing. And you feel that here in a lot of ways. Like, there are parts, I think that they either should have done it completely seriously or went in the totally opposite direction and had, Jim Broadbent be playing some crazy character or something like that. We get a little bit of that in the beginning, but then it just sort of like settles into everybody's sad.
I think, because, I'm not opposed to it if you want to have big theater kid energy. Like, I say go for it.
Yeah, right.
But
sure.
this, I think, like the National thing, it's like, this feels very like 2006, where like there was like stuff that was like, this is like a musical, but like a cool one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Or it reminded me of like Across the Universe or something like that. Like,
this
ain't your daddy's musical, Or,
right. Yeah.
but that had like Beatles songs in it,
Yeah. And Across the Universe, like, I think they really planned out their numbers, to hit a certain tone, to deliver a certain message with some of the songs. And in this, like, the choreography was just kind of people waving their hands around. Like, it wasn't really great dancing, or it wasn't really like saying a whole lot. I didn't think.
All the songs,
and Ben Mendelsohn's in it,
and
Ben Mendelsohn, his scorecard, I don't know, it's not looking so good.
No.
He's been in a lot of bad movies at this point.
All the songs too, like, had kind of the same. They had a different instrument kind of going in the background, but like all the songs sounded like the same song, and I couldn't tell when it was like a reprise of a previous. When I think of like a musical, like usually it's like, this is like the ballad, this is like the jazzy song, and this was just like all the songs were, I'm so in love. It's like, okay.
Nick Cave is Cyrano.
That'd be sweet. I did like the sword fight in the alleyway. Yeah. They're like genuinely good choreography, which I feel like you don't see as much anymore. And I was like, if they made a cool action movie,
conspire, find a way to put a little more swordplay into it.
Because they honestly they did really well. I don't know if it was as good as the tennis racket fight in Roxanne, which was also sweet, but it was pretty good.
So that releases widely soon, in a couple of weeks, and so I guess we'll see if it kind of disappears, which might be likely because it's February, and of course bigger things like Batman are on the way. But I'd be interested to see what a wide audience thinks.
Good reviews
if it's the new
so
Cats
far.
Or it does, and I wonder what happens when it hits general audiences, if they'll embrace it or not. I bear no ill will towards Cyrano.
No,
not for me.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
I'm afraid of worms.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that bit. That's a good one.
Well, we're not afraid of worms or words, and let's take a break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more Backtracking.
Hi, I'm Mikan Hana.
And I'm Caliban.
And we're the hosts of the Sailor Noob podcast. I'm the expert.
And I'm the noob.
You're talking into the wrong end of the microphone.
Aye.
Okay. Every week we watch a new episode of Sailor Moon and learn about monsters, fashion, food, culture, and of course, the sailor warrior of love and justice, Sailor Moon.
All right, now, what is her rank? Is she an admiral or a rear admiral?
Okay, shh. The ad's almost over. We're a couple of magical people, and every week we Moon Prism Power make up a new episode.
Ready or not, ships? Steady as she goes.
Please stop that. Sailor Noob is available every Friday on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Shiver me timbers. Okay, we're back. It's time to talk about the Trek side of this equation. Worf, as a character, has always been an outsider. He was orphaned at an early age, grew up among humans, served as the only Klingon in Starfleet, raised a child alone, and accepted discommendation from the Empire. When he finally moved to DS9, is it any wonder that he chose to live alone aboard the Defiant? Worf certainly has the passionate heart and noble spirit of a Byronic hero. But can one be a Byronic hero if they don't drink, smoke, or fuck? Conventional wisdom would say no, but Worf does play one half of a Cyrano-like duo in the DS9 episode Looking for Parmok in All the Wrong Places.
Only a Ferengi can put a price on love.
You may be worth more than all the latinum in the quadrant.
But when Quark falls for a Klingon woman,
she's glorious.
The cost is more than he expected.
Why am I putting myself through this?
To seduce a Klingon.
What does she see in that parasite?
Quark must learn to be a Klingon. Love never hurt this bad on the next episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it was a nice spin on it. And it really fits his character really well.
It does, and it's funny that this is really the last... so Worf arrives in Season 4 on DS9, right? And the two-part of Way of the Warrior, when he shows up, is a great showcase for Worf. It's a great, two-part episode. I think it actually airs as a feature. And then he just kind of disappears and doesn't really do a whole lot. And it's just kind of a guy that shows up at the Replimad or whatever. And this, of course, takes place, early in the beginning of the 5th season. And it's where they really start to find, I think, a lane for Worf. It's the kind of start or the first blushes of the Worf-Dax romance, which is going to take us very far. And Worf is starting to warm up to being in the cast of DS9. That being said, it's still a little weird because Worf is immediately smitten with this character Grilka that comes on the station in a way that we don't see often from Worf. Do you know what I mean? For Worf to be kind of fawning over this chick's hot, but it's it isn't really a Worf thing to be like, I'm gonna have to go yell at somebody in the bar and demand blood wine, try to get this chick's attention.
True, but I think it fits him really well for a couple reasons. One is we haven't really seen him interact with many Klingon women, and one of the main ones he did interact with, he had it seems like a little fling with, and he was like, "We must get married."
Right. Yeah.
So I think it plays off
my post-sex tradition, getting married.
Yeah, which comes up in this. So there's that. Yeah. But yeah. I think it also is sort of, he is this figure of he is so desperate to be, I feel accepted as a traditional Klingon, even though he it's interesting because he always doesn't act like the other Klingons we see, and I feel it's because he's studying it from afar almost, you know what I mean? He's not actually immersed in that culture, and so that's what I get from this, whereas as soon as Klingons, one of whom is a woman, comes on board, he's Klingon horny mode activated,
Yeah, right.
I think it fits him actually pretty well. It's very weird, but it's one where it's the weirdness shows you a side of his character that you didn't, or was beneath the surface, I guess.
And it's kind of a flip because whereas Cyrano represents all of the values of this kind of libertine romantic sort of pre-Byronic hero, you turn that on its ear with Worf, who is not particularly verbose or he likes opera, but he's not well spoken with honeyed words. It's more about, he's also following these traditions and these values of being a warrior, and approaching
right, yeah,
a woman or a situation, like a Klingon should do, even though he is a man kind of out of that world. And so it's strange to then have him be the Cyrano to Quark's Christian, whereas like Quark is the guy who's like can talk his way out of anything. So it's not only a great idea that they had to adapt this for this episode, which this episode's not really all that important, and it's like sequel. It's a sequel to an earlier episode that wasn't important, where Quark gets married to this lady because she's a real life Nigerian prince that just needs him to get married to her so she can get her money. So it could have been a throwaway thing, but instead they make it like full of character, and they take the inspiration for it and like twist it around and make it fit their own thing. The only thing that I have a question about is that, like, so what does that make Dax? Because she's also kind of helping out, but also kind of like, I'm just sticking around to watch what happens with this thing. And if anybody on the station was a Cyrano-like figure, I think it would be Dax. Because she's just she's so stylish, she's so knowledgeable, she's so, well-spoken and has all this history and past. Like, she's sort of like the pinnacle of achievement as a Cyrano would be.
And she also has like a unique.
She's doing the flips. She's making the fish, with the with the herbs and stuff like that. Yeah.
She can go play tango.
Yeah.
And then it's like similar to like I feel like with Dinklage or with the way they portrayed Steve Martin, where it's like they're like worried about something. It's like that's not actually a big deal. It's like with her, it's like, oh, but she's like got a bug in her, But it's like, who cares,
Yeah. That's her nose? Yeah.
Yeah, that's her nose. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, like her being a Klingon weeb kind of pays off in this episode.
Yeah, it feels like it's so many. That's how good they were with Deep Space. I mean, they weren't always good, but like they did a sequel to like a Quark episode that they added a Worf and they added Dax, who has this Klingon history, and it's like they just had all these like perfect elements that they made work. And it makes me think of back when we did the whatever that one with the wishing game was, where we did the Wonder Woman episode.
Yes,
that was kind of comedic, about how like they're just really good at like I don't think they could have pulled this type of episode off as well on like The Next Generation. Like they really nail every time they want to do, like, not always, but when they want to do a comedic episode, they're really good at like getting you invested. And it's not like, oh, this is just some stupid, side thing they're doing. It's kind of dumb, like there's an even the one where, this is kind of jumping ahead, but the one where, Odo and Kira have they finally get together or whatever. It's like a straight up rom-com episode, but it's like awesome, like they do. I don't know, they really invest you into like just these like comedic romantic storylines.
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned Some Kind of Wonderful before, and this is kind of a Some Kind of Wonderful, because in that Eric Stoltz wants to get with Caroline in the City. What's the actress's name? I can't remember. And
Caroline.
And Mary Stuart Masterson is kind of his like platonic tomboy friend, and so she's sort of helping him out. Then as the story goes on, Eric Stoltz realizes that he doesn't want Leah Thompson. That's her name. He ends up being with like the friend at the end, and that's kind of what happens at the end of this. Dax is there to help with the comedy, but then as the thing continues, Quark ends up with the Roxanne character, and then Worf ends up with Dax in the true comedy fashion. Everybody gets together at the end.
So they kind of expanded what happened in Roxanne a little bit too, where it was, instead of a love triangle, it's a little nice love square.
Yeah. And thinking about the fact that this came out in the 90s after Roxanne, I wonder if they were also kind of doing Roxanne as well, keeping that sort of happy comedic ending. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like, I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I was talking to my friend about it, and I think she was not positive on it because now that you mentioned that movie too, like she felt like, oh, I've kind of seen this before, and it kind of hits all the same beats. You know, it doesn't. She felt like it did not twist or like do anything unique with the formula, I guess. And it sort of made me think about the Rashomon episode we did, where it's like, like they took that premise of like, let's do a Rashomon, and you were saying in that episode, like they didn't do enough to it. Like, they could have had a sci-fi spin on it, but they really didn't. You know, it was just to like replay the events. And I wonder if that's how this episode came off to my friend, where it's like, oh, you're doing this, but it's in the future. Like, what else can we do? You know, like, but there's really not. It's played just as a straight. This could take place at almost any time except for when Worf is like controlling Quark. You know.
But that's part of it, though. I think they kind of both did and didn't, because I think that, you know, that whole thing where he can control Quark's movements, we never see anything like that ever again in Star Trek. I believe that there's something like that could exist in Star Trek, but I think that that's a great sci-fi adaptation of the whole I'll stand here under the balcony and tell you what to say while
I agree.
you try to say it.
I agree, and
I think that's a great example of how they changed it to fit their idiom.
I totally agree. I was just sort of playing devil's advocate here a little bit for the benefit of my bud, but I did really like it, and with how the kind of story, like we talk about, like these classic kind of tales. I feel like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, like let's just do that type of story with these familiar characters, and we'll use it to flesh them out still, you know, like we do. Like you said, we learn a lot about Worf that seems weird, and I don't know. I think it's great. It's not the best episode of Deep Space Nine, but it hits all these elements really well.
I want to mention real fast some actors that are in this that have been in other Star Trek things before. And Tumek and Thopak, the two male Klingons that we see, are played by Joseph Ruskin and Phil Morris, respectively. And Joseph Ruskin has appeared several times in the Star Trek franchise, probably most famously as, what's the character's name? I can't remember the character's name, but he's the bald guy in The Gamesters of Triskelion on the TOS episode, which I hope to talk about someday. That's the one where they all have to, you know, fight for their lives. We keep kicking around this idea of a pit fighting show, but we don't know
maybe
what
that's
episode
it.
do it with. But maybe this is the one, yeah. But he is, like I said, been in Trek a lot. And then another guy that's been in Trek a lot is Phil Morris, who plays Thopak. And Phil Morris, in addition to being an actor, a recognizable actor, and a guy who's been on Trek a whole bunch, is the son of Greg Morris, who played Barney Collier on the Mission Impossible series.
Oh, okay.
Which we talked about for the show. Yeah.
That also, I just forgot. We didn't mention the other Trek sort of connection in Roxanne, which is Steve Martin's like plastic surgeon guy he was talking to in the movie. Wasn't he Bashir's father?
I believe so.
Richard Bashir. And
that sets me up to say that, you know, Brian George, of course, plays Babu Bhatt in Seinfeld, and Phil Morris plays Jackie Childs, the Johnny Cochran inspired defense attorney on Seinfeld as well.
It's a whole web of 90s TV actors.
Yes, which, I mean, it's just 90s TV, and then it's two long running shows that I'm sure everybody's been on at some point. Right. But yeah.
It's always going to happen on the bingo, you know. It's there.
That's right. Well, we closed the circle on that one.
Yeah. So it's always nice to see. I liked it when I saw him. I was like, hey.
So we've talked about, I mean, we can talk more about Quark and the wacky things that happen to him as he is trying to woo this woman and train with the Batleth. But something that interests me is the other side story that people forget about in this episode, which is the rapidly forming polycule between Keiko, Miles, and Kira in this episode.
Yeah. That's another thing. I was talking to my friends about it. They were like not happy about that.
Yeah, really?
But you know what? I think maybe it's been so long of watching this show that I'm like, I I think it's weird. It's definitely weird, but it's interesting. I don't know. I kind of liked it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it is just like this weird thing that happened. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I don't know how to feel, and I think that Ronald D. Moore, who wrote this episode, and he wrote the previous Grilka episode as well, talked up this part. He said that he was a lot more excited about this part of the episode than the riff on Cyrano, just because he felt like these were the real life consequences or results of this arrangement that they've got. You know, at this point, Nana Visitor in real life is pregnant, and so she's on the show she's carrying Keiko's baby in a it's the future, man. I don't know, for some reason they had to put Keiko's baby little Hoshi inside of Kira. So now Kira's going to have the baby, and because of that they are, you know, very protective of Kira. She's spending a lot of time with them, and you start to see like this kind of relationship develop where O'Brien is like arguing with Kira. The episode opens with Bashir trying to like overhear what's going on, a little bit of gossip, and he thinks it's Miles and Keiko, and it's Miles and Kira fighting like a married couple. And then, you know, people, we all know, we're already in the what is this? We're halfway through the rehabilitation of Keiko. I think enough people have come around at what a great character she is and how well she's played by Rosalind Chow. So I'm not going to go off too much on that, but it is she's a very understanding partner, because she's like, why don't you two go take a vacation together and rub oil on each other? It's like, at some point, even in the fucktastic future, some kind of propriety has to come in here, right? Isn't there another episode where she gets mad because he's looking at some other girl? And I'm sure it's written by somebody else, but oh no, it's the end of the first season where he gets like the hot technician who turns out to be like a assassin spy.
Oh yeah,
and she's all jealous of him spending so much time with her. But at this point, she's like, go ahead, guys, have fun. Do whatever you feel. It's like, okay, interesting.
Well, it's like maybe she knows Kira more better.
Absolutely. There doesn't have to be anything weird about it, but the filmic or the televisual syntax they're using is like a Three's Company episode.
Yeah, totally. You're right. Yeah. You're right. I think it's funny. I don't know. I don't have like a large point about like, oh, it's good because like it says this, like I do with like the Worf thing. I just think it's kind of funny. It's like that's it, I guess. Is like, it's like, oh, that was a good bit for one episode. They kind of they're kind of like, maybe we shouldn't. You know, I love that ending where they're like, oh, and how's the view? Oh, it's so romantic, you know, and like they're so dismayed by it. I don't. Yeah. I know it. Maybe some people. I think some people kind of work themselves into a tizzy, like finding reasons to be upset with it, like it does something bad for the characters or something. But I don't know. I just think it's funny. It's not that important. It's not that deep. And I also think Ronald D. Moore is going a little bit too far with like, these are the consequences. But it does kind of make sense. Like they spend all this time together. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that could happen. That it's like two people who you think normally just have a very, very standard working relationship with. They're probably friends. And then they're like kind of thrust together this way. And
it would be interesting if they were able to, because my headcanon puts a lot of things behind it, which is that, you know, they are coworkers and there's a lot of things to like about O'Brien. There's a lot of things to like about Kira. You know, I don't know if they've ever like thought about it. He's been married the whole time. Plus, she's got a boyfriend. Like, Shakar is out there. But Shakar, ever since she got pregnant, Shakar has not really been around. Like, he's staying away on purpose. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, because so it's like, where's Shakar? Shouldn't he be, like, rubbing her feet and supporting her? Why is he off on Bajor? So you can sort of see and I think in, like, a modern show, this would be the beginning of a runner where we would have to do something with these characters. But like you pointed out, I think it's great that it's just this thing where they're like, we've somehow, without noticing it, found ourselves in this weird accelerated relationship, and going to the romantic fuck planet would be the wrong next step for this. So let's
Right.
just not go. Or you go and I'll say, oh no, she left without me. And let's just forget this ever happened. And that's fine.
Right. It's almost like they avoided the dramatic subplot.
Sure. Yeah. It could. Yeah.
And
some
that-
other show. Yeah. Right.
And that's
This
funny
isn't
to me.
Melrose Station. Yeah.
I actually
yeah.
think that's hilarious that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we could have gone on this, like, they could have done a whole episode where they accidentally wind up on, you know, the romantic, they end up on Ryza or something because she needs to really relax, and the whole episode is like him trying not to like get with her or
Vanessa
something.
Williams is trying to get them to do it, and yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought this was funny.
Yeah. I also thought that everything that Armin Shimmerman does is great, but like
He's so good,
his stuff
yeah.
his stuff at the end when he's being controlled by Worf, and apparently he worked with like a mime to get the movements of him fighting like he's being pulled around like a puppet.
Wow.
Was great. And then the dialogue at the end where he's like, yeah, now I'm gonna kill him. No, I guess I'm gonna pick up his sword. and now I'm gonna kneel down.
I like when he's
Yeah,
like, that's
great.
enough talking. Or whatever.
And now we're done talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Worf is just like, I guess he was like getting fancy because he just kind of dumbly cuts the thing off of the thing.
Yeah.
That's funny. All that spinning around to the batleth, and he cuts off the little antenna.
Worf is fun. Yeah, and I like how it's bookended too, with like there's some little Bashir bits like in the beginning, and then in the end, he's like, everyone's coming into sick bay.
When he's working in the Klingon sex ward. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's getting pounded too hard, and he's like, oh my god. I don't know. Yeah, this is a great episode actually. I think to me we've talked up where I'm like, this is a classic.
Yeah, absolutely. From the dialogue to the exploiting of the funny situations and the comedy and the hey, yeah, it's a great episode. Well, what we do when we reach the end of a discussion about a great episode is we turn to the technology that we see in that episode. There are some weird, never seen before and really never again technologies in this episode of Star Trek, and Star Trek is Star Trek because of the technology of the future. It facilitates what the characters are doing, like trying to gaslight a Klingon princess into marrying a Ferengi, but just as often it's the actual complication that they're dealing with. So on every show we randomly pick from a list of Star Trek technologies, we add what we get to the non-Trek media and we subtract it from the Trek episode to see how each would be different. We call this our technological exchange. And the list of technologies that we pick from goes like this. We've got phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drives, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And if I roll on my random number selecting technology, the number that I get is 5, which is warp drives. How would the world of Roxanne and the romance between Roxanne and C.D. Bales be different if warp drive existed?
Warp fire trucks, for one.
Warp trucks. Warp trucks is for sure. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, Roxanne, she's into astrology or astronomy. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they could have had that be an element, but we would just have the episode of Deep Space Nine, of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, of course, that's always the thing with warp drive.
Yeah.
We have to find more terrestrial uses for warp drive. Perhaps in this case, then, she is... Well, here's a small thing, but significant. When she goes to leave, of course, in the play and in the film, Christian and Cyrano are called to war. And Roxanne has to, get the letters from them. In the film, she goes to work on the big telescope, with her uncle or whatever it is. And so in this case, she could be, instead of a comet, it would be some kind of stellar phenomenon that has not been seen before. And so she's going to travel there to get the readings. She's going to get on the Enterprise or the Voyager or something like that and go out there.
Yeah, and I feel like you could. I think when I was thinking about like what could be like a different sci-fi spin on this, that's not just like comedic. Like maybe you do like the tragic version of it, and I could totally see that where, you know, the like there you could have some element of some sort of like anomaly. You know how like Star Trek sometimes is like Twilight Zone-y, where it's like we don't know what's going on. Maybe there could be some, I don't know, I don't know what the spin would be, but you know, maybe you do Cyrano in space and there's something weird going on the whole time. Like that could be kind of interesting.
It's Cyrano, but there's something weird, something spacey happening here.
Instead of cousins, you find out at the end they're the same person from a different dimension. I don't know how this relates to warp drives, but
well, something that this is travel. This is faster than light travel, and something that Star Trek never really worries about is causality and the fact that, you know, the mere fact that you are going somewhere faster than you should have got there creates causality problems. You are essentially arriving before you left from their time period, from their time frame. Right? But that's never dealt with because we don't want to think about the fact that, you know, the Enterprise has to reset its clock every time it goes to, you know, a different place or a different space station.
Right.
So maybe we could have something like that where, you know, Roxanne goes to visit this phenomenon and comes back and she is younger than everybody else. Everyone else on Earth has aged because of the twin paradox.
Oh, I could see that, or maybe it happens like to Cyrano himself, and then you have a Thomas Riker situation. Like maybe he accidentally makes two of him.
Two Cyranos.
Yeah, some sort of like.
And then they must.
Yeah, I don't know.
They fall in love with each other, and they live happily ever after.
That would be an awesome twist on the end. You realize, you know what? I love myself, and that's all that matters. And it's like you literally love your...
The nose isn't a problem. The nose isn't a problem.
I'm used to it.
It's probably true that the real life Cyrano didn't have like a crazy nose. I mean, he was he probably had a Gallic nose. He's a French guy, but James McAvoy a couple of years ago did a stage version of Cyrano in London and didn't wear a nose at all. And so it's like, okay, historically that works, but boy, there's a lot of lines in the play where they just talk about the fact that the guy's
he
nose
doesn't
is
even
big.
have a big nose.
Yeah, you know, he's Scottish, right? I mean, he's got a regular sized nose, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, true. I forgot he's Scottish. I guess that makes sense though with his name and everything.
Yeah.
That makes me think they like instead of like a Riker situation, they should do a split Cyrano.
Ooh.
Where he has to give himself advice.
Right. God. So he's talking to himself. This reminds me of we've seen Cyrano in Star Trek before when Barclay is rehearsing Cyrano with Dr. Crusher in the Nth Degree, the TNG episode. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's a situation kind of, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but he goes from being the Christian character kind of to being the Cyrano character because we'll do that on the show someday because that's Flowers for Algernon, of course.
Oh.
Not to give it away now.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Okay, well,
that works. There's a lot of ideas in there.
Yeah. Here's a bag of ideas. What about if we take warp drive out of the episode Looking for Parmok in all the wrong places?
Oh, they're in one place mostly.
We always and plus we're kind of screwed because they're already in one place because it's DS9.
Yeah.
I always think when we cut warp drive out of Star Trek, I always think about like space, quote unquote, space sci-fi, but it just being in one place, right? So. Does it involve humans instead of Klingons? You know, are the Klingons just a warlike faction of humanity, you know, that lives on Earth? If this is Earth, this could be some other planet. Are there symbiotic worms that live, or maybe like come to Earth, you know, on a comet and then infect some humans? And so those are, you know,
worms.
Gestalt. Yeah, they're afraid of worms. Gestalt beings like Dax.
It makes me, you mentioned Klingons. I kind of think, you know how they, like, Klingons are very, like, operatic figures, right? Like, I feel like you could just do a purely Klingon Cyrano. You know what I mean? Like one that takes place entirely on Kronos with just Klingons, and it'd be like I don't have any ridges or something. Like that would be his deal.
Interesting. He's a smooth head Klingon.
Yeah,
Ooh, you're a genius.
Yeah, so you're
a genius.
Thank you. To our standards,
I'll tell you
it's like a handsome guy, you know.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a total Twilight Zone. It's Eye of the Beholder, right? Where the pig people are. We're gonna cut your face up, pretty lady. You'll be a pig person. I'll tell you, as a former director of the Klingon Christmas Carol, which is now it's a Klingon Wonderful Life because of rights issues. It's really tough to do things like this. Paramount does not like people doing things, even when they're using something that is completely open source, like a Christmas Carol, or I would assume at this point, Rostrand's play, Cyrano de Bergerac. So I love this idea, and the next time I see the guy who runs that show, I'll see if I can get a percentage for you. I'll suggest that to him. But that being said, I think that it would be doing the opposite of what this episode does, which is it takes those ideas and then flips them back the other way, so that Cyrano is like the baddest duelist. He can sing the deepest of any person. Like he's very attractive in those ways. But then, like you said, he's an old style TOS Klingon, right? He's a total smooth head. And so he feels like he can't, love anybody. And then I guess he would have to, we meet the Christian character, Christian, who would be like the rippest, buffest. He's got 14 ridges. He's totally great, but he can't even pick up a batleth. He's just worthless. And then our Cyrano character has to support him in that way and find a way to maybe with the same device, with the virtual control device.
Yes. So he doesn't.
This is. We really should cut this out. Like I want to write this.
This is a good idea. This is this is the best idea that I think we've discussed. That it's like a legit. This could exist.
Well, we're committed to giving all this stuff away for free, so I guess we'll have to keep this in.
Well, we can still do it.
I love this idea.
And no, this is okay. The date is February 8th, 2022.
We have to mail this podcast to ourselves.
Yes. Yep. I'm mailing an MP3. I'm mailing a flash drive with this podcast on it to myself. No one can take this.
Yeah, I like that idea. And then
I like the idea of starting to mine like lesser classic plays to like try and fit other Klingon things to it. We run out. Like there's no more Shakespeare. What else?
Yeah, Shakespeare. Anything it's in public domain. Yeah, because when they changed the Klingon Christmas Carol, like they went to what's a movie that you can do that's free? Basically, It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Right.
So but this is a great idea. And then I guess if we'd have to decide if we want it to end tragically or I don't know, funny Klingons are, but to end in a way where everybody kind of gets what they want.
That's true. I think because I think part of the thing is the guy can't fight.
Yeah.
So that would make sense if he died, I guess. But
that guy dies.
No, actually, what it should be is they die, but it's like glorious, and everyone's like stoked. They're like, they're in Stovacor.
Yeah, they're like, man, I always knew that guy would die horribly and wonderfully someday. He did it.
Yeah, everyone's happy, but no one.
And in
Roxanne,
and in
is
death,
still
no
alive.
one has a. In death, no one has a forehead, so everyone's equal.
Roxanne, played by Roxanna Dawson.
Yeah. All right. I'm loving this more and more.
I'm calling her.
All right. That totally. Yeah. We got to get her. Yeah. Slide into the DMs on that one. Awesome. That totally made up for the other one. Good job. Should we tell people what's coming up in the next episode of Backtracking?
Yeah. This next one's good because it's like a classic example of, I think, what our show is about. I think, like when you think of those types of things. So we're talking about the TNG episode, The Big Goodbye, which is inspired by many things in this type of genre, but we're focusing in on the movie The Maltese Falcon. And there'll be a lot of those types of crime stories that clearly they're influenced by with that one. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Classic 1940s noir. And another situation where you can either read a 300-page book or we could watch a very famous Humphrey Bogart movie. So let's do that one instead.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to do it that way. I don't know, maybe...
It's of a kind with Casablanca as well, which we've talked about on the show. Because it features a lot of the same actors.
Right, we got two main dudes at least, right? And I feel like we love doing that. Like this week we had our boy Steve Martin come back, so...
Yeah, that's right.
Like having our cast of
gunning
characters.
To be the new Tom Cruise on the show.
Yeah. Oh, we'll
see who it's going to be.
We got to get Tom Cruise back someday.
We have to.
We'll have
I wonder if Top Gun
reverse engineer Top Gun into this.
Well, they're in an academy. There's an accident, and one of the pilots dies.
Whoa!
I think we know where to go with this.
I think
we know what to do.
I like where your head's at. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll work on that off air. But that's it for this week's Backtracking. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you like the show, tell a friend. And you can follow us at Backtracking on Twitter. And tell us, too, what you think we should look at in future episodes. We're just getting started this year. And we're always looking for ideas for Trek episodes that have been inspired by other media, or sometimes the other way around. Let us know at Backtracking on Twitter. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
I'm on Twitter. I'm at GooeyFame.
And I'm at K-A-1-I-B-A-N on Twitter. And you can find all the programs on the Just Enough Trope Network at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. And that's it for us this week. We will see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.